Hello guys, today we are going to talk about postcolonial theory of the book Cynical Theories made by Helen Bulkers and James Lindsay.
So, to start with the presentation, it is pretty important that you keep in mind the concept of colonialism. So, it is the power and the right, we could say, to expand territories and exert political and cultural authority over other peoples and regions. Now, we will talk a little bit about the origins of post-colonialism. So we were talking about colonialism before, but in this presentation, we will talk specifically about European colonialism. So it began in around the 15th century and continued into the middle of the 20th. And well, it proceeded upon the assumption that European powers had the right to colonize. Then European colonialism collapsed in the middle of the 20th century. It was following the Second World War, and that's when decolonization efforts proceeded quickly on the material and political levels. It was by the early of the 1960s when moral concerns about colonialism were important in both academy and among the general public, especially on the radical left. Eventually, post-colonial theorists established themselves by rejecting colonialist meta-narratives by focusing on the discourses of colonialism. So, to continue with the presentation, I would like you to please read along with me this quote from the book. So, the concept of post-colonialism is clearer for all of us. It says, Postcolonialism is therefore mainly a narrowing of postmodernism to focus on one specific element of modernity, colonialism, and the tool it applies is postcolonial theory, which is theory adapted to that problem. Later, we will talk about the relationship between postcolonialism and postmodernism, but please take into account this quote so you understand the whole presentation. Now, what would be the relationship between postmodernism and postcolonial theory? Well, postcolonial theory is basically the first emanation of applied postmodernism. Now, well, postcolonial theory came about to achieve a specific purpose, decolonization, which is the systematic undoing of colonialism in all its manifestations and impacts as well. Within postcolonial theory are both the postmodern knowledge principle, as you know, it rejects objective truth in favor of cultural constructivism, and the postmodern political principle. As you already know as well, it perceives the world as constructed from systems of power and privilege that determine what can be known. Of course, the four primary themes of postmodern thinking such as the blurring of boundaries, belief of in the overwhelming power of language, cultural relativism, and the loss of the individual and denial of the universal are, of course, found throughout post-colonialism. Now I'll introduce you to authors that are pretty important for post-colonial theory. The first one is psychiatrist Frantz Fanon. He was born on Martinique under French colonial rule, and he is often considered foundational to post-colonial theory. So here we have what colonialism represents to Fanon, which is a systematic denial of the humanity of colonized people. These colonized people must resist violently in order to maintain their mental health and self respect. We also have Edward Said. He is the father of postcolonial theory, and he took inspiration from Fanon's description of the psychological impacts of having one's culture, language, and religion subordinated to another. Fanon argued that the colonialist mindset has to be disrupted and, if possible, reserved within people who have been subjected to colonial rule. So we also need to take the concept of Orientalism from Edward Said. And in this case, the key idea in postcolonial theory is that the West constructs itself in opposition to the East through the way it talks. So the West, they are the rational, but the East, they are superstitious. Um, in the West, they are honest, but in the East, they are deceptive. In the West, they are normal, but in the East, they are exotic. In the West, they are advanced, but in the East, they are primitive. In the West, they are liberal, but in the East, they are barbaric. So the East is constructed as the opposite to which the West can compare itself. The term the other or othering is used to describe this denigration of other people in order to feel superior. Seth called this mindset Orientalism, a move that allowed him to attach powerful pejorative to Orientalists, meaning contemporary scholars who studied the Far East, South Asia, and especially the Middle East from other perspectives.
Now that you know the key concepts of this chapter and also the principal theories that support this theory, we are going to see what is postcolonial theory, some aspects that are important, and how this theory is so dangerous for our societies. So, a large part of its claim is the assumption that there must be permanent problems in us resulting from colonization that have been transmitted to us through language, through discourses, and through the years. So, this theory is not based on an investigation of the realities that affect the countries and the people that were colonized and the aftermath that colonization may have caused, may have caused, uh, but is based on an analysis of attitudes, beliefs, discourses, and mentalities which are sacralized or problematized. Their base argument is built on the assumptions that postulate white Westerners and the knowledge understood as white and Western as superior to Orientals, blacks, and browns, and the knowledge associated with non-Western cultures, despite the fact that it is precisely the stereotype they want to fight, to combat. Um, an important concept in this theory is the colonized everything because this refers to the colonized thought that is not literally colonized. And the campaigns promote under this concept focus on reducing the dependence of white academics on former colonizing powers and the replacement by colored academics from previously colonized countries. This also comes with a strong inclination to problematize and belittle knowledge understood as Western. And this theory holds that objective knowledge, the knowledge that is true for everyone, regardless of their identity or their country, is unattainable because knowledge is always tied or performed to cultural values. And for this theory, the knowledge that is currently most valued is intrinsically white, Western, and it interprets it's an injustice regardless of the reliability of with which that knowledge has been produced. And the colonial narratives that is related with the colonized everything frequently attack rationality, which post-colonial scholars consider a Western way of thinking. So objective knowledge is only a Western way of thinking. They say that. And the theories do so by using Foucault's ideas, despite the evidence that Foucault was actually a white Westerner man whose influence principal in the Western countries. And rewrite history they said that we need to rewrite history from the perspective of the oppressed people. And this has two aspects. One is to recover voices and visions of the world of those who have not been taken into account to give a completer and more accurate picture of history, but it is also frequently used to rewrite history according to local or political narratives, rejecting any claim to objective knowledge. And Spivak, that is a theorist, argues that subalterns, colonized people with subordinate status, do not have access to speech even when they apparently represent themselves. And this theorist also mentions that knowledge of subordinates and their status as knowers is marginalized through the dominant species and dominant discourses. Now we are going to see how dangerous this theory is. we have to take into account the name of Mirananda, because she's an Indian postcolonial scholar, and she argues that assigning science and reason to the West and the traditional and spiritual to the East make, makes it very difficult to address the real problem. So, while colonialism constructs the East as an contrast to the West, postcolonial theory intentionally constructs the East as into a nobly oppressed position. Mm, while liberalism says that people are people wherever they live. So we can only learn from the realities of colonialism and its aftermath by rigorously studying them. And thus, postcolonial academics and activists are not doing this. Postcolonial theory not only threatens the foundation of advanced contemporary societies, but also impedes the progress of developing societies. This results in common statements. First, postcolonial theory insists that getting a non-Western culture to accept that human rights abuses are taking place at the local level requires colonizing that culture with Western notion of human rights and their violation. It reinforces the power dynamics that postcolonial theory seeks to dismantle. And the second one is that postcolonial theory claims that any abuse of human rights that occurs in countries that were colonized is the legacy of colonialism. And its analysis stops there. They don't give us solutions, they don't give us answer to this problem. And this makes such abuses difficult to address in their own context and with their own state motivations, which are often connected to non-Western religious and cultural beliefs. And the great danger with this theory is that evidence and reasoned arguments are understood as Western constructions and are therefore considered invalid or even oppressive. And those who are disagree with postcolonial theory are seen as confirming the theory and espousing racist, colonialist, sexist, or imperialist attitudes for their own benefit and to proclaim the views of the others. So this theory is not objective, but they pretend to be objective. This theory is irrational, but they pretend to be rational, but they don't have arguments, they don't have evidence, they don't have proofs, and is based principal on literature. This is a simplistic view, and the problem of colonialism and post-colonial isn't that simple. So we can see a cognitive distortion between the arguments and the theories and the arguments.
Postmodern, postcolonial approaches are totally different from liberal approach. So we need to remember that liberalism holds that science, reason, and human rights are the property of every individual and do not belong exclusively to any set of people. But postmodern, postcolonial approaches differ from this liberal approach and are often criticized for perpetuating Orientalist binaries rather than seeking to overcome them. So we have four kinds of mindsets to understand how they differ from the liberal approach. The first one would be a colonial Western that says Westerns are rational and scientific, while Asians are irrational and superstitious. So the Europeans must rule Asia for their own good. Okay. The second one would be a liberal mindset, which would say all human beings have the capacity to be rational and scientific, but individuals will vary widely. Therefore, all humans should have all opportunity and freedoms. So we see the differences are really big. We start with the postmodern mindset that says the West has built the idea that rationality and science are good to perpetuate its own power and marginalize non rational and non scientific forms of knowledge. But how would applied postmodern mindset would look like? It would be, let's say, kind of the same as postmodern mindset. The difference is that it has an activist um, characteristic. It says, therefore, we must now devalue white Western forms of knowledge as belonging to white Westerns and promote Eastern ones to even out the imbalance of power. So we see that this practice is referred to as decolonizing and seeking research justice.
Thank you so much, guys, and see you in class. Bye.